Rise up and wise up. The Sagely Wisdom podcast is back in action. Happy Wisdom Wednesday, everyone. My name's Mike Troup, here to host and take you on a little Cornell storytelling journey. We received a lot of really nice feedback on episode 1, and the Wisdom Train will roll on each and every Wednesday. So how can you make sure that you're still getting all of this fantastic storytelling content? Well, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, probably the easiest thing to do. You can like the show on Facebook. We have a page. It's facebook.com/SagelyWisdom1865, where you can find new episodes each and every week. And if you want to participate in the show, if you have a story of your own that you want to share here on the pod, just shoot me an email. I'm at sagelywisdom1865@gmail.com. That's the show's address. We will take it, get back to you very promptly, and schedule a time to sit down and record so that your wonderful stories can reach the Sagely Wisdom listening community, which, as I mentioned last week, is just growing by leaps and bounds. It's exponential growth. Now, this week I had the distinct pleasure of sitting down with a first-year student here at the Johnson School, Matheus Simões Pires, and Matt has an awesome story. This guy came into business school as a CEO, which is kind of the opposite of how I thought this whole thing was supposed to work. I thought you come here, you leave, and then eventually become CEOs. This guy had already done it by the time he got here. And when you talk to Matt, you can tell right off the bat, this is the kind of guy that knows how to build relationships. He's creative, he's passionate, and to top it all off, he's usually got some of the freshest kicks in town. Why is that important? You're about to find out right here on Sagely Wisdom.
So the story I would like to tell you today, it's about how I was able to start my own company at 21 in the south of Brazil, and in less than 3 years to take that company and my products, my shoes, into customers in over 30 countries. When I was around 4 years old, my mom got me and my sister, who was 6 at the time, on the dinner table, and she told us to draw a scenery. We have the drawings that we made that day until this day at our home, and to me, it really shows the difference of my personality and my sister's personality. So my sister's drawing is basically a pretty good scenery with ducks and happy people, and my scenery basically has a home, but the clouds have beards and the sun has like a huge hair. So from this drawing, with the same briefing, I get a sense of how me and my sister are different people. So that was me. I was a young, creative guy, and the problem with being creative is when you're young, the school you study at basically gives you everything you need to know about yourself. So I was in a German school. It was sort of a boarding school, and I grew up thinking that I wasn't good enough to make great things in life. I knew that I was different, but I knew that my kind of different was wrong. So I grew up without a lot of self-esteem. But I knew that after school, I had to search for a place where I would belong. I knew that school wasn't the right place for me, but I knew that I had to keep searching for my place. When the time came to choose my undergrad, I decided to choose product design. And I was ready because I knew that that would be a place where I was going to find a lot of people as creative as myself, and I would have the freedom to express, and people would value my creativity. And for the first year, and for the first time in my life, I spent 1 full year learning how to study and preparing for the Brazilian SATs. At the end of that year, I was able to get selected and to go into a college that was very competitive. As much as going to a competitive college doesn't sound that amazing, for me, it was really a life-changing thing. It was the first real victory that I had in life. It was the first time that I had actually worked hard for something that I wanted and was able to achieve it. And looking back, I can go back to that moment and see how that was the start of my self-esteem and how I was able to build it from there. So imagine how motivated and anxious I got into product design. I was ready to get into a dream life. I was ready to get into a perfect place with a lot of creative people, and I had created this fantasy in my mind of how amazing product design school would be. And I got into the class, and I had classes on calculus, physics, and it was super boring. I knew that that wasn't going to be the place where I would find myself. What I did then was to decide that I had to continue to look for my passion. I had to go outside of college and find the place where I would belong and the job that I would love. And my quest took me into doing a lot of courses of things that I found interesting. So I bought a beer brewing kit with my cousin and started making beer in the garage of my home. I learned how to silkscreen and started making shirts and stickers. I bought a camera and started editing videos of me and my friends, of us skating. But one of the courses that I did basically changed my life. And it was a course on footwear. It was on a city close by to the city where I live, called Porto Alegre in Brazil. And the cool thing about this course wasn't that it was about footwear. The cool thing about it was that inside the school, they had a full footwear factory. And for me, as a creative person, it was the first time that I was seeing where products are born. It was really amazing to see all the materials, the processes, and the machinery. And inside that factory, a thought came into my mind. I thought, if I can put myself in the middle of this process and change a material or change anything, the outcome and the product that will come out of it will be completely different simply because of me. It will be myself in a product. So that day, an idea came into my mind that I wanted to make shoes and that I wanted to be a footwear designer. After deciding that, I spent around 6 months inside of my house, in my room, just looking at footwear blogs. I would spend the whole day simply just browsing through the internet and seeing like what Nike had come with, the new model from Adidas, and that was my life. But after 6 months simply surfing the web, I noticed that what I was doing wasn't being a footwear designer. Basically, I was a consumer of other people's creations. And I remember thinking, do these guys that produce and design the shoes that I get to see here in my place, are they better than me? Do they have any creative, God-given ability that I don't possess? Am I cursed to live a life of simply consumption? Or do I don't have what it takes to produce? Or are they doing what I would like to do simply because they did things differently than I am doing right now? So that day, I decided that I would have to find a factory to produce my first shoe. And I remember putting on an alarm clock for the next day to get my car and to go to a factory and see if they wanted to produce my first shoe. The next day, the alarm clock went off at 7 a.m. and I was completely paralyzed in bed. For about 30 minutes, I simply laid there just trying to come up with a good excuse not to get out of bed that day. The problem was that I was a shy kid. I had never had to do anything hard or difficult in life. I had grew up around my parents, not having to fight or struggle for anything. And how from the night to day, I would simply go out in the streets and become this new mini entrepreneurial kid who would like basically change the world and sell his ideas and his passion to the world. Of course I wouldn't. And I remember the feeling, I can remember to this day the feeling that I was feeling that day in bed. And sometimes I see how far getting out of bed that day brought me, that I feel like going back there and simply slap that kid who's afraid to get out of bed and tell him, buddy, can't you see how much your life is going to change if you simply fight this fear and get out of bed today? Can't you see it? And even to this day, every time that I'm afraid of doing something, I think, isn't there another me in the future who's way better off wanting to come here and slap me because I'm afraid of doing this right now? Isn't just doing this right now going to change my life forever? So that day I was able to get out of bed after a lot of personal struggle. And what I found was a lot of closed doors. Every factory wanted to know what was the name of my company, where was the headquarters, how many thousands of shoes I wanted to produce, and I had nothing. I only had like a sketchbook and some even like pretty bad sketches of the shoes that I wanted to produce. So I went to the first factory, they said no, the second said no, and I think everybody just shut their door at my face that day. But at the end of the day, I found a back door. And the back door was basically a prototype studio, a place where people produce shoes, not to go to stores, but to go into trade shows. So the shoes that they produce has a completely different procedure of making behind it. It has to be perfect. It has to have the highest quality ever. So they have a completely different mindset into producing. And because of this different mindset, they said yes to my idea. They said that they were going to produce my shoe. So they told me where to buy leather, the soles, everything, and told me to come back in 2 weeks. I came back and the shoe wasn't ready. 3 weeks passed, 4, and nothing of the shoe. At the 6th week, they called me and said that my shoe was ready. And for all those weeks, I remember just sitting at home thinking how amazing would be the moment that I would step into my first pair of shoes. I was pretty sure that the sky would light up, God would come down and would give me a high five and say, man, you're so awesome. And I got there, I got my shoe, I put it on my feet, and it really was amazing, but only for 1 second. On the second second, I started seeing problems. I noticed that the leather wasn't as soft as it was before. I noticed that the sole was not very well cemented. After a little bit of walk, I noticed that the leather from the inside of the shoe was staining my socks. And I noticed all these problems that I was able to perceive on my shoe, but I didn't know how to fix. So what I had to do was to go back into the studio and talk with the people that helped me produce it. And they started to teach me footwear. And I could see that with each new sample, I was able to solve one of those problems that I saw in my shoe, and I was able to learn a little bit about footwear production. And I'm pretty sure that the reason why my shoes became amazing after a long time was simply because I had to struggle and fight and solve every single problem that a shoe could have. So after I started wearing my own shoes 24 hours a day, I started feeling happy. And it wasn't because it were my shoes, but it was because I felt for the first time in life that I really had a voice, that I really had a way to express myself and my creativity and my ideas to the world. So the feeling I had was that I'm no longer voiceless. And this really became a big thing in life for me. And once I started only wearing my shoes, a lot of friends started to notice my shoes and to order their own. But they always ordered my shoes with a specific twist. They said, Matt, I want the same shoe as you and my size, but change something. And I would ask them, okay, what do you want me to change? And they said, I don't know, just change anything. Try to make the shoe like myself. And one friend said that, 2 friends said that. And when 5 or 6 people asked for the same thing, and I started thinking, okay, so these friends, they can buy whatever shoes they want. They can buy all of the great brands, and they want my shoes. Why is that? And I noticed that what they wanted was not another pair of shoes. They wanted the same thing that I was so happy to receive in my shoes. They wanted a voice. They wanted a creative outlet with the world. And when I noticed that I could help other people find their own voices, I noticed that that wasn't just a little project, but it was a market niche and something that could become a brand. So that was the way that I shaped Mutta, what would become my footwear brand. I got everything that I was noticing for my clients, the things that they wanted into my shoes, and all the things that as a consumer I didn't like of not receiving from the big brands. But once Mutta started becoming a company and I noticed that I would become a CEO, I started to realize how big the battle would be. It would be me, little Matt, against Nike, Vans, and all the big corporate footwear empires. And I noticed that basically it would be me against the world. And at that time, I was reading a lot of biographies of really famous entrepreneurs and CEOs and people that really do great things in life. And I noticed how the way they behave and the personal capabilities they had were different than my own. And I noticed that in order for Mutta to be successful, I would not only have to work at the business, at the core, but I would have to work in myself. I would have to change myself in order to have great possibilities of success. So I call this stage of my life of self-overcoming because I was able to see every part of me that was different from the personality and the way that really great CEOs act and try to work at that in myself. And with that, I started selling more shoes. And once I started selling more shoes, I started noticing that the shoes that I was selling were not only helping myself, they were helping the craftsman that worked for me to provide a barbecue at the weekend for his family. And the happiness that he would get from that barbecue would be put into more shoes on Monday. And the client that I would sell to on Tuesday would have an awesome product because the craftsman that did his shoe was a happy man. And that gave me a lot of energy into selling more shoes. So basically, I took all the shoes that I had, I went into a photo studio, and I asked them to take really high quality pictures of my shoes. I took those pictures and I sent them to every single footwear blog that I knew. I just said, I'm a really big fan. These are the shoes that I'm producing and would be an honor to be posted on your blog. Nothing happened, and at that time I was selling about 5 pairs a week. And one day I went to lunch, and 30 minutes after, I had 50 new orders into my inbox. That day I had to hire my cousin to finish those orders, and I had to go to the factories and basically live 1 week out of a hotel simply to manage those orders. So after that, my brand really started to grow. And about 1 month after, I was invited to go to a trade show in Zurich called Sneakerness. And I remember thinking at the time, am I ready for this? I don't even have a company set up. I'm just selling shoes out of my trunk. Should I go to a foreign trade show? But I also remember thinking that the fear that I was feeling about going to Switzerland alone to exhibit my shoes was probably the same kind of fear that I was feeling that day in bed. And I decided to go for it anyway. So I got into Zurich, and I was unprepared. I was young, and the only thing I had was 2 big suitcases full of shoes and a big dream. And what I learned there was that luck happens not when preparation finds opportunity, but when initiative finds opportunity. Because I wasn't prepared, I wasn't ready, and it was the most amazing experience of my life. At the end of the trade show, Mutta was the brand that did the most business there, and we were competing against really amazing, great brands. But way more than doing great business in Zurich, I met amazing people. I met 2 guys. One of them is called Hardy, and he's from South Africa, and the other one is called Edson, and he's from Amsterdam. And they are industry giants. They're titans in the fashion and footwear industry. And they told me, Matt, what are you doing after the trade show? And I said, I don't know, probably going back to Brazil. And they told me, so we're doing this Euro trip because there's a lot of trade shows going on around Europe, and we would like to take you with us, and we will introduce you with the right people, and maybe we'll be able to help you out. And because of that invitation, my life changed completely. And to this day, I think what made them help me, I had nothing to offer them. I was only a 21-year-old kid with some samples and a big dream. And I noticed that people who are successful sometimes are able to see a big dream and a lot of effort, and they value that and they invest in that. And that, I think, was the only reason why they helped me out. So after that trade show in Zurich, I started to do the most amazing trip around Europe. I went into interviews in Amsterdam. I went to parties with rap stars in London. I went to sell my shoes in really premier stores in Manchester. I did a photo shoot with a model in Berlin. I had meetings in high-end places in Paris. So I was the wrong person, but I was at the right place and at the right time, and that changed everything for my brand. After that trade show and that Euro trip, my life became a complete mess. Straight after Europe, I went to a trade show in South Africa. Then I went to a trade show in California. Then I went to New York. I did another trade show in Germany, in Berlin. And you know how people have dream cars? When you have a footwear brand, you have dream stores. There's a few stores that are really amazing and only carry the brands you really love. And my dream at that time was to sell at those stores. And when I went back home, after all of those trade shows, I had orders from those stores. And at that moment, I really realized that dreams do come true. For the past 3 years, I have given everything. I had left my family, my friends, relationships, everything for a dream to not only make great products, but to make those great products reach amazing places. And after all of those struggles, I was able to see that it was all worthwhile. So imagine how much excited I was to produce the shoes for the best stores in the world. For about 2 weeks, I tried to go to the factories and stay there 24/7, just taking care of the production. And when the day came to pack the shoes, I was in the garage of my home with one of my employees, and we were just doing quality checks and putting the laces on the shoes. And I noticed that one shoe had a little quality defect. And I noticed that another one had it. And when I saw, basically 40% of all the shoes going to the stores had quality problems. And we were on a really tight deadline. And I remember thinking, I can send these shoes and get the deadline done, but I know that if I send them subpar quality shoes, I'm never going to be able to sleep another night calm. So I had to go into my desk and write the hardest email ever. Basically, telling the owners of the best stores in the world that their little Brazilian investment had screwed up. And I was pretty sure that they would cancel their orders, but they were completely fine, and they simply told me, don't worry, Matt, send the shoes that are good and redo the shoes that are not very good, and we will wait because we really want your shoes here. So that is the story about how I started selling on stores in New York, in London, and in Hong Kong. But on the end of 2013, I received a video through Facebook from my cousin, and the video was about George. And George was a bootmaker from Oregon, and he had spent 45 years working alone, making high-quality leather boots in Oregon. And on the video, George says how much effort he has put into his work, how much he has given his life to his labor, but because of arthritis, he no longer can do a lot of the processes that go into footwear production. I saw that video 2 weeks before going into vacation from college, and I decided to spend my summer vacation or the winter break with George. So for 3 months, I lived and worked with George. And with George, I learned a lot of amazing things. I learned everything that goes into making really amazing quality products. The boots that George does last 15 years, and their price is around $800. But when I was working with George, I noticed how I was becoming him. And I noticed that if I didn't change some things in my life, I would probably become just as him. He did had amazing products, but he wasn't a happy man and he wasn't a successful man. So I started thinking about what I would have to change in my life in order to become successful, but to have a life different than George's. After George, I went to visit a cousin of mine who was doing an MBA at Harvard. And at Harvard, I noticed something interesting. I noticed that the students there were being trained to really change the world and to do amazing things. And not only they were being trained to change the world, but they thought that they could change the world. And I started looking at myself and I thought, do I think I'm good enough to change the world? And I said, no. And I remember thinking, why don't I even have the courage to think as high as these kids? How can I think so low of myself that I don't even have the courage to dream big? And I noticed in Harvard, students learning to deal with the same problems and the issues that I had in my own business. And I knew that an MBA would really give me the opportunity to be a better leader and to become a better person. And when I got back home in Brazil from George and from Harvard, the only thought that I had in my mind was that I needed to become as big as my dreams. I had created a successful business, but I hadn't created the structure for it to prosper on a long-term basis. I was working alone, and I did not have a lot of people helping me out. So with a lot of thoughts in my mind, I had meetings with a lot of my mentors, and they all told me the same thing. And I told them, so I have this business, and it's working out in Brazil, but I also have the opportunity to try to do an MBA and really become a better leader, and in the future, have a really great business. What do you think I should do? And they all told me the same thing. Matt, what you have done so far is amazing, but you're very young, and you have to learn more things. Do your MBA, because after it, if you decide to go back to Mutta, in 6 months, you will accomplish way more than you have accomplished so far. So after those meetings, I decided to stop Mutta and to try to get into a great MBA. And I called that part of my life the day I killed myself. Because truth be told, I was giving up on the only love that I had ever had, my baby, something that I had worked for and hustled for 4 years, something that I had given up everything to pursue. But I knew at that time that if Mutta were a stepping stone for me to achieve greater things in life, I would be fine with it. So after 2 years, I was able to achieve that great dream and got into a great school at Johnson. But not only that, I was able to, after I got accepted into a great MBA, to take the next step in my business. So for the past 6 months, I've been training 3 managers who now in Brazil run Mutta, and I was also able to connect them with a production partner who takes care of the production of our shoes. So now here at Cornell, I'm able to sleep well because I know that my business and my baby is being taken care of in Brazil. So at the end of my talk, I really like to say some tips, and I don't think I'm old enough nor successful enough to tell anyone how to live, but I think that on this road, I have learned some interesting things about life, success, struggle, and really, really working hard. The first thing that I learned is if you want to be successful, there's only one essential trait you need to have. Of course, successful people have many, but I believe there's one fundamental one that you have to start with. And that trait is self-confidence. You have to think that you have the ability to do amazing things. If you don't think that you're capable or valuable enough to really get your dreams or do successful things in life or to be a successful person, you will never be able to put in the hours and put in the work and to grind into really achieving great things. And the really amazing thing about self-confidence is that it's just like a muscle. It's not something that you get from your parents that comes in your DNA. It's something that you can work and you can make stronger in yourself. And the way that you can do that is by challenging yourself. Is by going into environments and situations that you're scared of. Is by fighting the fear that you have to get out of bed sometimes. That fear that I fought for and really changed my life. So I believe that if there's one thing I learned on this journey, is to cherish feeling fear and to value being scared. And to see every situation where you're scared as a situation and as an opportunity to grow and to become a greater person. My favorite quote is from Helen Keller, and she said, "Life can either be a daring adventure or nothing at all." What are you going to choose?
Thank you again to Matt Costa for taking the time to hang out here on the Sagely Wisdom podcast. And of course, a special thank you to the Red Talks crew for sending him our way. And I suppose a thanks is also due to you. Yes, you. You're thinking, what did I do? All I did was listen to a little podcast. Well, that's what you deserve a thank you for. We appreciate you giving a click on Facebook. We do have a Facebook page for the show. It's facebook.com/SagelyWisdom1865. You can catch all the latest episodes of the show there. You can, of course, also subscribe on iTunes, which is how a lot of people are finding the show, or Stitcher, or Downcast, or any other source that you use to subscribe to podcasts. If you do that, you'll have new episodes of Sagely Wisdom delivered each and every Wisdom Wednesday. And lastly, if you've been enjoying the show so far, and now you're sitting there thinking, you know what, I can hop behind that microphone and entertain the masses, you're probably right, and there's a way for you to do that. All you have to do is shoot the show an email at sagelywisdom1865@gmail.com. Let me know what's up. Let me know the story you've got to tell, something from that table of contents, something from your life story, your life journey, and we'll rap together for a little bit so that your story can live on in perpetuity through the majesty of the podcast medium. Nothing better. So that's enough wisdom for one Wisdom Wednesday. Thank you so much for checking out the show. My name is Mike Troup. This is a Sagely Wisdom podcast. We are all now the wiser.